Britain no longer has a military, and that's the headline screaming out from the Telegraph today. Former SAS officer Tim Collins says the focus on diversity and lowering the levels of security clearance has undermined the great British armed forces. Collins warns that we are resorting to desperate and dangerous measures simply to stay afloat. Well, joining me now to discuss this is the former head of counterterrorism at the MOD, Major General Chip Chapman. Chip, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure. Tim Collins really pulling no punches today, a highly respected SAS soldier, saying basically we do not have a functioning army. I despair. We are, as a nation, defenceless. What's your take on that?
Well, firstly, you have to look at it in terms of the armed forces and NATO. So I think, firstly, take the RAF and the Navy. I think anyone in the RAF who just delivered bombs from Cyprus with the engineering and the fueling and the pilots who went there would say that's not true, that you could do a 7-hour flight from Cyprus to deliver weapons onto the targets against the Houthis. So the RAF are part of the integrated air missile defence of Europe. So not necessarily true about the RAF. Secondly, HMS Diamond knocking drones and cruise missiles out of the sea, all the crew on that ship acting towards a common purpose. So we'd like a bigger navy, we'd like ships at sea, but not necessarily true in terms of the output and cohesion that you saw there. I do worry more about the army in terms of its capability rather than its diversity. So for example, at the moment, the enhanced forward presence in Estonia, where we have a battle group, we'll call that 1,000 troops. In 2022 at the NATO summit there, we were supposed to have a brigade, we'll call that 4,000 troops deployed. We have them allocated, not deployed, because we can't rotate those. Secondly, from an army perspective, we have no enhanced warfighting capability. We won't have a division available until somewhere around 2030 because of the equipments which aren't online until then, principally Boxer, Ajax and Challenger 3. So the army has more problems than the other two services. I don't think it's a question necessarily of diversity. I think the kids who are in at the moment and serving, certainly, as I mentioned, those operations by the RAF and Royal Navy are doing a fine job. We'd like more of them. And I think as long as they cohere themselves and want to follow the values and standards of the armed forces, selfless commitment, loyalty, courage, discipline, respect for others and integrity, and fighting power, the mixture in one combination or another of discipline and cohesion, morale and initiative, courage and toughness, and that ultimate willingness to fight and the readiness, if necessary, to die, then we can get there in the end. We are not there with the army at the moment. They're in pretty clip order.
OK, Chip, Tim Collins says there's a three-pronged assault. First, block recruitment by discouraging the majority of the population who have defended the country for centuries through diversity. Second, prong two, demoralise, isolate and shame white people. And three, lower security standards to make it easier for our enemies to infiltrate. And the third of those he fears the most.
Yeah, that's. I don't think that will happen. So if you look at the security checks that do happen, you have three levels. You have a basic check, you have a security check, and you have developed vetting. So someone like me would have been developed vetting because I had access to secrets. So I don't think that will change. Tim gives a rather poor example, actually, which was people being killed in Somalia recently. Well, actually, British Army soldiers were killed in Afghanistan by Afghan soldiers in what we call green on blue, when we hadn't changed the security standards. So there was a bit of a flaw in Tim's argument there. What was discriminatory was the RAF policy under Air Chief Marshal Wigston, where he did confuse diversity with equal opportunities, and that was deemed to be discriminatory. That was found to be true, and I think they've rowed back from that. Everyone has an equal opportunity to serve in any of the armed forces. That is right, that should be the case. We all should work to one team, one purpose. That's why the team and the task come ahead of the individual in the armed forces. And if anyone breaks that, that is when that has a negative impact, either in terms of personality traits, mission traits, or identity conflicts. Those things should not happen in the army. But again, other things such as feeling valued and respected should also happen in all the three services. And that's why we've had problems there in terms of our organisational culture, which people have been trying to get to grips with in the last few years.
OK, thank you for joining us, as ever, Major General Chip Chapman.